Hello everyone, how you doing? This is the Exotic Bourbon Hunter coming back at you with a little bit of a fun video. This is actually a video that's going to be a little different than a lot of the other ones I do. Usually I go on bourbon hunts and things like that, but I'm pretty sure we've all noticed some things happening in the bourbon world. And these events, which have been happening in the bourbon world, are attributed to a lot of factors that are going on in our everyday life. So, without any further ado, we're going to go and address the big purple elephant that's still sitting in the room. Or maybe in stock market terms, we're going to talk about the bear market and the bull market of bourbon. So, let's get this crack-a-lackin'! Let's talk about the things I'll be discussing in this video, okay? You know, the things we're going to be talking here is we're going to be talking about some of the things that are influencing the bourbon market. And I mean, off of the top of my head, there's 5 things that come to my mind. 2 of them could kind of be in the same category, but for the purposes of this video, we will not be having them together. We'll kind of separate them because there is a little difference in between the 2. But before we do that, I would like to have a pour of this Midwinter Night's Dram. It is allocation season. This bottle I bought from Publix and I drastically overpaid for it. This is going to be the limited engagement. And this is from last year. I picked this up. This is Act 12. Now, I was so excited to find this bottle in the wild. I got it from Publix, and I was an absolute donkey. I paid $199.99, so $200 for this bottle. So this is probably a $20 pour right here. But I went back to Publix this week, and they started to get their allocations in for allocation season, and they got the latest bottle of Midwinter Night's Dram in, so that'd be Act 13. And shocker, they raised the price to $209.99, so that's $210 for this bottle of Midwinter Night's Dram. That bottle is going to probably sit on their shelf because that's super duper expensive. I don't know what's going on in this regard, but Publix is usually very good when it comes to pricing their bourbons. I just got a bottle of Russell's 13 for $170 from the same location that has this bottle for $210. So would you rather have a bottle of Russell's 13 for $170, or would you rather have a bottle of Midwinter Night's Dram for $210? I'm jumping on that Russell's 13 bandwagon every single day of the week. It is what it is. I was a donkey. I spent too much money, but you could definitely get this for like $130, $135. They get them in at Costco. They also get them in at the smaller mom and pop stores. You know, they'll take care of you. But let's jump into this. So let's talk about the 5 things and the 5 topics I'm going to be talking about. Number 1, let's talk about the uptick in the amount of bourbon that is now being shipped to these liquor stores and shipped to these big box stores. That's the first thing, okay? The next thing, how readily accessible are these bourbons now? Next, we're going to talk about the different age groups of people that are drinking. After that, we're going to address politics. Are politics influencing the bourbon market? Now, this is where the 2 topics could be together, but we're also going to talk about tariffs. Tariffs have been in place now for a while, and we're going to discuss tariffs for a little bit here because that's also influencing the bourbon market. Before we get into this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps me in the Google algorithms. Also, when you see this video, hit that hype button. hype the video. You could hype it 3 times. Google is putting this new thing in there, and it is to help small-time YouTubers such as myself. It helps get our content out to a wider, demographic. Let's talk about the uptick. The uptick in the amount of bourbon you're seeing at liquor stores and in big box stores. In the comments, let me know, have you been noticing a bigger variety of bourbon that is now starting to show up at your local liquor stores, also at your local grocery stores, Walmarts, Publix, Kroger's? I'm very curious, especially if you're viewing these videos from outside of the state of Florida. I'm very curious to see what you're experiencing in your states. What I've noticed here is there's definitely been an uptick in bourbon production. Now, a lot of this has to do with the amount of distilleries that have gone upon themselves to do multi-million-dollar renovations, increase bourbon production. They started doing this stuff, 10 years ago when the bourbon market started to explode. Now, finally, these barrels of bourbon that are now 10 years, 12 years old are now coming into the market. For instance, look at Eagle Rare 12. It used to just be that there was just an Eagle Rare 10. But now I think due to, demand lessening, they have all these barrels of Eagle Rare 10 laying around that they've now aged longer than they thought they would. So now they've come out with an Eagle Rare 12 to try to eliminate all that surplus bourbon. It's better to sell it than to keep it, especially if you're sitting on warehouse after warehouse after warehouse after warehouse of bourbon. These are, facilities that hold, tens of thousands of gallons of bourbon. There's definitely an uptick because the distilleries have been putting out more because now they have produced more. They produce more bourbon than the consuming population is willing to consume. Now, you see all these nice bottles coming up. Now, how readily accessible are different types of bourbon? Because some bourbons, there will always be a demand. There's always going to be a demand for Pappy Van Winkles. There's always going to be a demand for Michter's 20, Michter's 25. There's always going to be a demand for Blanton's, Blanton's Gold, Blanton's Straight from the Barrel. There's always going to be demand for the Weller products. These are things that are not going to go away. The demand is not going to go away. I have noticed that prices have come down a little bit depending on where you're buying your bourbon. At the same time, though, I'm also noticing prices are going up. Like I said, for instance, example number 1, the Midwinter Night's Dram at Publix. It went up $10 from last year, and for no reason. And then, what I've also noticed is, I was a sucker. I bought the new Jack Daniel's Heritage bottle, all right? I didn't buy it for $100. Some liquor stores were selling it. I waited. I was hoping to get it at Costco because it's coming out at like $56, $57 at Costco. After a couple of weeks, I only saw 1 bottle in the wild, and I got an ABC invite, and I wound up buying this for $85. I think I overpaid for it. It's supposed to be an everyday shelfer that's going to be coming up, but for the purposes of the channel, I bought it at a little bit of an elevated price. Not too bad, but still a little elevated. Now, there is a supply and demand for this. The supply is limited and the demand is high. Therefore, people are willing to pay a little bit more for it. Do I regret it? No, I don't. But I also haven't been buying a lot of bottles lately as well. So the bottles I am buying, I'm making them count. Well, speaking of making it count, let's have a sip of this Midwinter Night Dram. That's a delicious pour. This is one of the best High West products I think they produce. I'm not a big High West fan, but I do really love this Midwinter Night's Dram. Let's talk about the people that are drinking bourbon. Alcohol consumption in the United States has been on a downfall now for a while, ever since the legalization of recreational marijuana in a lot of states, and then medical marijuana. A lot of teens are now turning to marijuana drinks, or marijuana infused edibles or marijuana infused beverages, and they're staying away from alcohol. And the reason why they're doing this is alcohol has a lot of negative aspects to it. You can't, drink and drive, but you can't take marijuana and drive either legally. Although a lot of people do it. A lot of people drink and drive, unfortunately. But the side effects of alcohol, you can die. If you drink too much of it, alcohol, poisoning, you get a nasty hangover in the morning, which I've had plenty of those. You get sick in the middle of the night because you've had too much alcohol. I'm pretty sure we can all relate to this. But when it comes to the marijuana-infused drinks, they're not really getting sick from it. You pretty much, you have too much, then you could just go to sleep, you sleep it off, and then you're fine. You're not going to be hungover the next day. I mean, there's some days I feel like it takes my body, 1 or 2 days to recover from a hangover, depending on how much I drink. But as I've gotten older, I also started to drink a lot more responsibly. I don't overindulge to the point where I'm going to be hungover the next day. I just don't like being hungover. It's just not my thing. Some people, that's their thing. It's just not mine. But yeah, you have the younger kids now, the teenagers. They're just not buying alcohol. They're not. And also, it's become a little more socially accepted to indulge in marijuana products. Whereas back in the day, it was highly, against the rules, against the law. You're a rebel if you smoke the joint. You'll have the peace, love era, from the hippies and stuff back in the 60s and the 70s. Let's talk about the next part. And that's going to be politics. A lot of you know that politics in America is not something I discuss here on the channel, and that's for good reason. I believe that when you do a YouTube channel that's alcohol related, politics should have nothing to do with it. I am not a political channel, nor do I want to be a political channel. But politics is definitely influencing the bourbon market more than you want to believe. So you can see that up in Canada, Crown Royal has left the country of Canada. They have ceased all production of Crown Royal in Canada. They have actually now laid off their whole workforce and are in the process of bringing their business into the States. This is a huge blow for the Canadian economy. This should hopefully, help the American economy, help produce some jobs wherever Canadian Royal decides to, wherever Crown Royal decides to, set up shop. I'm sorry for those of you in Canada who lost your jobs, but, unfortunately, I don't know much about what's going up there on in Canada, but I know that they're not very happy up there, and once again, it's not my place to discuss that. Politics is influencing the market. You have tariffs. So President Trump introduced tariffs, and one of the things that had happened is other countries put retaliatory tariffs on American exports of alcohol, such as bourbon. And what has now happened is these countries have yanked all American-produced spirits off of their shelves. So now that market that these distilleries were able to capitalize on, look at Blanton's. Some of these countries like Japan, before bourbon became big here in America, the foreign markets were the only markets that were buying bourbon. Before the boom, Japan and Europe, I mean, they had special editions of different Blantons. You know about that. There's the red, there's green, there's the black label Blantons. Some you can only get in Japan, some you get down in the Caribbean islands. And these markets were solely dedicated only for American bourbon. And Americans were not buying bourbon at that time. They were buying whiskey, vodka, they were buying all kind of rums, but they really weren't into the American spirit of bourbon just yet. It wasn't until later when the bourbon boom started to boom that all of a sudden, things took off. By 2009, the bourbon boom was well underway. By 2015, the bourbon boom was, hitting record levels. By the early 2020s, people are waiting online, overnight, sometimes days to get allocated bottles. When I first started this channel 2 years ago, one of my first videos, I waited at a Costco in Claremont, Florida. I got there, I think like 11 o'clock at night, right after work. I was only number 16 in line, but the line wrapped around the Costco. Now, the last Costco opening, there wasn't even Blanton's on there. So, I left, but I haven't seen a line wrap around a building anytime in the past or recently. But I'm going to tell you this, guys. There will always be that demand for the higher up stuff. People will still line up for hours, if not days, to get this stuff. But the market has definitely crashed, for sure. I have definitely been able to pick up bottles at a much lower price now than 2 years ago. But people are still collecting. People are still drinking. And just keep that in mind, this allocation season. The distilleries have also increased prices of the bourbon because they see what's going on with the secondary market. And instead of the people in the secondary market capitalizing off of their product, they've caught on to the game, so they've raised their prices. And since they raised their prices, the people who are receiving the product are also probably raising their prices too. Like, for instance, this Midwinter Ice Dram. So just keep that in mind. This allocation season, don't overpay. And be smart. Be patient, okay? You'll be amazed at what will happen if you have patience. It's just like waiting in traffic for, and you're stuck behind a wreck that happened. Just be patient. And eventually those who are patient will be rewarded. But everyone, thank you for tuning in. Enjoy yourselves. And let me know in the comments what you see. Do you see the bourbon market crashing around you as well? Because I've definitely picked up on it. I started noticing it a year ago. This video is drastically delayed. But I figured I might as well address the purple elephant in the room because they're definitely here. The bear market is here. It's not a bull market in bourbon. Bourbon is starting to look like, it's not an investment. Some people thought it was an investment. Now the investment bottles are going down in prices. You get a Pappy Van Winkle 12-year Lot B if you get the chance to get it on secondary. And it's going to be under $1,000. It's probably going to be $900 around there. But that's secondary, maybe $850 if you're lucky. So the demand is still there, but just don't fall victim to these museums. Just say no to museums.